Hi, everyone, and welcome to our ninth end of work cycle update for stakeholders. We really appreciate all of you being here today, whether it's in person now or you're watching this recording after the fact. We just really appreciate you participating in these and providing this stakeholder feedback to the development team. So the purpose of these meetings is really a high-level update at the end of each work cycle with a stakeholder audience in mind. We do record sprint reviews and demos at the end of every sprint. These can be quite detailed. So if you're looking to really dig into some of the more nitty-gritty of the work that the team is doing, these are on the Surfliner blog. And I really encourage you to go take a look there and explore those. One thing I will mention before we dive into today's content is this meeting is being recorded. And so we'll ask if you could please, just for audio quality purposes, if you could please keep yourself muted when you are not speaking. Also, please feel free to turn off your cameras when you are not presenting, or if you're just an audience member, because those may be captured in the recording. And in the interest of time, we are going to ask you to hold your questions until the end, but I do want to encourage you to enter them into the chat as we go along. So you don't have to hold on to them. It's just we'll address them at the end of the update altogether. All right, so I'm just going to get us started. So here's the agenda. Michael and I are going to give a quick sort of high-level work cycle recap. Then we're going to be hearing some updates from 3 of our product teams, Daylight, Lark, and Comet. And then Michael and I will wrap us up by talking about what's next for the team, followed by a bunch of time for questions. So to get us started, our first work cycle of 2025 started on January 14th, and we just wrapped this up on March 11th, so a little less than 2 weeks ago. And one of the things that was really new for the team during this work cycle is for the past several years, the team has been working together in these roughly 56-day on-off work cycles, and those were comprised of 4 2-week sprints, and then we had a buffer period on each end. But then we were off for the same amount of time. And this cadence was really helpful in helping each respective campus team balance our joint Surfliner work with the ongoing development needs of our local campuses, especially as we're supporting legacy digital library infrastructure. However, increasingly getting Comet and all of the associated products and infrastructure into production has become really one of the top priorities for especially Santa Barbara and San Diego. And because of that, we found that during the last few off cycles, team members from both campuses were continuing to do development work in the off cycle, but we weren't having that same organization and structure around planning and coordination. And so as a team, we do try to regularly reflect on what is going well and what is not going well in the way that we work together. And then we try to adjust and change accordingly. And so one of the things that we decided to do at the end of our last 2024 work cycle was to change the frequency of our work cycles together in order to help support this high priority of getting this infrastructure into production. And so what this is going to mean for our next few work cycles is that we'll just be running work cycles sort of one after the other. We're still going to give the teams a few weeks break in between, but we're going to be rolling in right into another work cycle. That also means for all of you that you will be receiving invitations to this meeting more frequently to ensure that you're getting those updates as we continue to make hopefully some speedier progress. And this is just really one of the first of 2 changes that we decided to make related to our work cycle cadence. I'll talk more about that at the end. But now I'm going to turn it over to Michael to talk about the goals for this first work cycle.
Thanks so much, Christy. I think that's a really important context for kind of how our goals look a little bit different in terms of theme and focus. So I think what I'd like to just maybe first share is that from a product perspective, we were looking at sort of Daylight, Lark, and Comet, not really thinking of these as discrete products anymore, but as like the suite of products that need to deliver a service, like specifically in that sort of getting to production context. And for us, that really meant sort of prioritizing Daylight development and that sort of shared frameworks for really like developing shared components, dependency identification, and sort of starting to think about early things, and especially API requirements. For Lark, that was really specifically for us trying to make some changes to that to get the code base itself into a place that is more forward-looking for sustainability and function, kind of both underscoring like that path to production, but then also getting it into production, which we're going to hear more about shortly, and the importance of test data there. And for Comet, you mentioned, Chrissy, that we were doing each respectively a lot of work in the off cycle. And I think this would be a really good time to also give a huge shout out to respective implementation team members just for the amount and scale of work that they did and how that really underpinned some really, really cool bug squashing that we're going to hear about later. So shout out to the teams. That was amazing. But that was the main focus, right? Like bringing that experience back into the work cycle to be able to address those. Um, for things that cut across some of these products, especially as it relates to sort of production needs, our DevOps or sort of more infrastructure or supporting infrastructure work was really around like production stability and like refining some of our previous ideas around that into with a more narrowed focus to very directly address our getting things to be stable, getting things to be performant, in a way of, and also like sort of deprioritizing a lot of previous thinking about what may be needed given expanded timelines. So a much more narrowed focus on what is really essential to be driving towards production. And I think to that end, we also really were prioritizing with that lens, what is going to help the teams and product owners and technical leads and our stakeholders like improve sort of that iteration time and decrease feedback loops. And so we're going to hear more about that from the product teams coming up.
Oh, good, I'm unmuted. But one of the things before we dive into the product updates, we also wanted to share out that another thing that happened during this work cycle was a lot of discussion around the environments. And by this, I mean staging, production, and really, first, I need to really clarify the purpose of each environment, making sure that we had stable environments that could be used by the dev team for demos and testing, but also for campus end users to support their testing. We also had oops, sorry, my mouse is really touchy. And if I touch it when I'm talking, it wants to move slides for me. We also heard from a number of our SMEs and our end users that there needed to be really a simplified review process for production content publication review as part of their workflows. And so really the outcome of all of these discussions is updated terminology that we're going to be sharing with you, and a sort of mutual understanding that using the term staging in our environment is actually quite confusing, especially because there is, for some people, this concept of content promotion and it being staged on another site before it's promoted. We did out of this also identify some needs for some additional environments and also for having those environments come with some seed data, and really tried to clarify the intended audience and purpose for each one of those environments. So this is just a brief view of the outcome of those discussions. So we have first our production environment, with production comment being that content that we really care about. Production discovery, these are the versions of all of our discovery platforms intended to be used by our patrons. This preview discovery is this new concept, providing library staff with the ability to load content into production comment, but then preview it in a discovery environment to make sure it looks right before making it actually available to end users. Um, we also changed the language around staging to really reflect its purpose as really a sandbox environment, and identified that really who the sandbox is intended to be for is library staff who will be using Comment in their day-to-day work. So they can do things like tests, they can train, they can try things out in this sort of safe environment without impacting the production data. We also identified, because Comet is supposed to track things like ARCs, that it would be good if these databases, that this version could be wiped and reset sort of on a predictable schedule. And the same that there would be these sandbox discovery environments. So you can see what those experimentations look like in discovery. And then finally, identified that the development team also needed an environment for the work that we're doing. Unlike production and sandbox, where the code is intended to be the latest stable version that's not going to change, um, this environment may be running a slightly different version, a newer version of that code, so that the development team can use it for demos like we're doing today, but also for testing. And so I think this really has hopefully helped to clear up some of that confusion, but will also give us all a really good foundation for this new stage of work that we're moving into. I think that's all that we had to say. So I'm going to turn it over to Elisa to tell us what's been going on with Daylight.
Hello. My name is Elisa Pierce. I am the Digital Library Development's front-end developer and UX designer, here working with Daylight on Surfliner. Next slide, please. So during this work cycle, we took a look at Daylight and saw sort of the maturity that it got to. Like we've been putting a lot of hard work in, and we really started to see Daylight and what that finish line could look like. So we wanted to get that documented. So one of the first things we did was we really sat down and made efforts to discuss what are our shared components? What work should we focus on? And how do we get to that MVP? And so what that allowed us to do is sort of define and document what those accessibility expectations are. It also allows us to clearly look at the usage and how we're going to style these and how they're going to behave as we develop it. So we were able to really plan how we were going to attack development. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so this sort of discusses what the outcomes of those discussions were. So we really have now a component library. And so we have an understanding of what those different components are that many campuses use for their library discovery platforms. We were also able to really take a deeper dive into those accessibility requirements. And we're really aiming for that WCAG accessibility 2.1. And so we want to match what basically is being driven by quite a lot of, I want to say the DOJ and UC to what accessibility needs to be for our institutions. And so we've really identified what that looks like, including using semantic HTML, ARIA roles and landmarks, and then keyboard accessibility. So that'll allow for screen readers and those that need keyboard accessible or other devices to be able to use our components nicely. The other thing that happened is we onboarded a new member. And we now have Chris Lopez as a part of our team. And so we brought him on board, and we're very excited to have our team grow. And then the other piece was some MVP. So like I was mentioning, we can really start to see what that MVP looks like. And so we've created basically some artifacts that allow us to see some mock-ups, some collaborative, well, not collaborative, but how the connectivity of the components look like, as well as we've got documentation on the library. Next slide, please. All right, so this is pretty much it. Like we've got a lot of components now. We were able to create new components this work cycle. We were able to refactor our other components to fall in line with the naming that we've come up with our component library. And we started to really dig into that connectivity from component to component. So now I'm going to share my screen and give a little demo. And by little, let's find my share screen button. Oh, I don't know if you can see all my tabs. So I usually have a lot of tabs open, but not this many. That's because we did quite a lot of work on multiple components. And just a little background on components. So what we're building here is a micro front end. So Surfliner is a series of microservices. And so I felt like this was like a part of that architecture to then lay on top of all those microservices. With that, we've looked into micro front ends, which are components or little snippets of HTML that show to the user and have interactivity to them. This is the 14 components that we've identified as shared components. And then there's also documentation on that accessibility. We also have documentation in our repo now that explains how each component works and how to use them, install them, and what their purpose is and what they're supposed to be doing. And so this is an eyebrow component, and it goes through how you're going to install it and that expected JSON structure. Now, in the slides, it says API. And so what this JSON structure does is really identify those dynamic points in each of these components that we can then pull in through an API. So it gives a nice first pass on what we're going to need on those API requirements. So this component is the eyebrow component. This is one of the components that we were really able to finalize. So this is a fully developed component. It has dynamic features for any campus to update the title on the left side as well as the menu on the right side. And let's see if I can grab the edge of this. And as it shrinks, it'll also become mobile friendly. And there's also accessibility that allows for keyboard accessibility and screen readers to recognize what's clicked and what's available. We have our search component. This is I feel like one of the most important pieces of the puzzle. This is going to grab that user's data and allow them to search. We created a new quick links, which is going to give over dynamic featured or curated facets in a quick links menu. We have a featured components now. And so again, curated items can then be added to this feature. And we've got our facets menu. We've got some sort and pagination. We have what I call the applied parameters, results applied parameters. So this captures user data that they're querying and then shows it to them. This follows best practices for UX to keep that information along the search journey. We have other pagination. This is more simple pagination. This is the results list, which currently doesn't have any items, so it's warning that there's no results. Another pagination, this will be a more advanced pagination that offers different pages that you could click to immediately. We have an object page with a carousel. So this is actually a deeper functional way to show the item. And then our metadata component. And what this looks like when it comes together, because like I was mentioning, these are components, and then you're able to then pull in each of the components onto the page. You get a full page. And so that's that object page. It's got a search bar up at the top, metadata down at the bottom. And the fun part is if we start at the beginning, here's another example of the components coming together. There's the eyebrow at the top, but it also allows for other components. So we've got the shared components, but that doesn't mean you can't develop specific components needed for each campus. And so this is an example of a footer down at the bottom that's not actually a part of our shared component library, and also some copy here. But what we can do now is when we search for something, we can start to see interactivity between components. And so now each of the components can really help speak to the other components and have them interact. And so now we have an applied parameters where we can click and things happen. We now have a list of paginated results where I can click and then it interacts. Then we can head back and then I can click on things and then we get result page. So we're really starting to put together those components and able to see sort of how they interact with each other. We still have work to do getting everything mobile friendly and accessible. And there's still some deeper functionality with the interactivity between components. And so those will be some of our focuses for the next work cycle alongside some of that API and developing that further along. And that's everything I have to show for daylight. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Margaret now to update us on work.
Yeah, I'm Margaret Kibbe. I'm the tech lead on Lark. You can move to the next slide. So Lark is kind of an interesting situation in the Surfliner project because it's the first product that we ever worked on. I think the first 4 or 5 sprints were pretty much focused on Lark, and then we kind of didn't work on it for a very long time after that. The primary goal really of this past work cycle was to restart that work in earnest. There were a lot of decisions that we made back when Lark was first being created. Now we have a lot more experience and we want to do things a little bit differently. So bringing it in line with how we're doing things everywhere else. Yes, Chrissy noted in chat, Lark is our authorities management service. If you're not familiar with that term, because we haven't been talking about it enough. When we first created it, it was a Sinatra application, which is a lightweight Ruby framework. All of our other applications are Rails frameworks. So we decided that it would be better if it was the same as everything else. So we made that a goal for the work cycle. One of the goals was to share more code between Lark and Superskunk, and I'll get into that a bit more in just a second. And then our final goal was to get the Lark application to a place where we can actually evaluate where it stands with all the tickets that we have open, and to a place where we can start building integrations between Lark and Comet and between Lark and Daylight and these other services. Next slide. So regarding the migration to Rails, we did the initial work, which was just focusing on getting it to deploy, getting it to pass its test suite, but not getting the API all functioning. So that was all done. And then the next step is moving the API over to Rails because Sinatra and Rails use different mechanisms for their API. And we've done some of that. You can get a record and see information about it. You can get basic information about Lark. There are some other API endpoints that still need to be done. So that's going to be one of our focuses in a future work cycle. Next slide. So this is a little picture that I put together describing Lark and Superskunk. Lark and Superskunk, Chrissy mentioned in chat. Superskunk is the metadata API for Comet. Lark is an authority management service. So they kind of serve similar roles in some respects, at least in terms of how they're used by other platforms. So if you're thinking of Daylight, Daylight wants to get information about an object in Comet. It's going to send a request to Superskunk. It wants to get information about an authority. It's going to send a request to Lark. And because they're doing very similar things in that respect, they have some broad categories where they're basically doing the same thing. They're both doing content negotiation, which is a fancy way of figuring out what the uh, what the person is asking for and giving them back the right thing. They're both doing resource serialization. They're both doing error handling. And then there's some application-specific behaviors that are different. So what we tried to do this work cycle was make all of that code the same. which really meant using what we did in Superskunk and putting that into Lark. Like I said, Lark was the first thing that we did as Surfliner, and we had a lot more experience when we did Superskunk. So we did things in a different manner that was better in most cases. So we extracted that code out into a place where it could be shared between both platforms. And now it's a single code base that's better tested than it was before, that's being used in both applications. Next slide. So here's the future work. We want to load some data into Lark for testing, and that's testing in two respects. I guess this is what we're going to be calling our sandbox soon, is we want to first be able to test what Lark is capable of, just standalone. But the other thing we want to do is we want to start building integrations between Lark and Comet and between Lark and Daylight, and it's really hard to do that when we have no data. So getting some data loaded in is probably our first priority. And then finishing the API transition into Rails, getting the rest of those endpoints working, and then figuring out how are we going to integrate Comet and Daylight in with that. So I think that's it for me. There isn't actually a Lark demo. I just didn't delete the slide.
All right. Well, then thank you, Margaret. I'm going to turn it over to Gabriella and David to update us on Comet.
Thanks, Chrissy. If you move over to the next slide, I'd like to take a moment to reflect on some important changes within our team since the last end of work cycle review in September. While we experienced some transitions, we also welcome new faces who are helping to strengthen our collective efforts. In case you missed it, we're excited to have UC Santa Cruz join the Surfliner team. So warm welcome to Rachel Jaffe, Ryan Schwab, and Sneha Gundarao. We're thrilled to have you all join the team. For UC San Diego, we have Matt Chambers, David Trujillo, and Chris Lopez. They've all come aboard. We sadly had to say goodbye to one of our valued team members, Thor Brickman. Their contributions are truly missed, but at the same time, I'd like to extend a special thanks to our DevOps team who have stepped up during this transition and made everything continue to run smoothly for us. Over at UC Santa Barbara, David Bowles, the Associate Director for Digital Library Engineering, has taken on the role of Technical Lead for Comet Development. Their leadership is already making a significant impact, driving progress in this crucial area. And finally, I'd like to thank everyone mentioned here for their dedication to the Comet project and beyond. These individuals represent the heart of the Surfliner team, and it's their hard work that fuels our success. So thank you all. And at this point, I'm going to pass it over to David to discuss Comet's work cycle goals.
Thanks, Gabriella. So in line with the stuff that Michael was talking about, the overall work cycle goals, what we're really concentrating on for Comet is moving it from development toward production. It's been kind of in a development phase for quite a while, but we really want to go live soon. We've got old content we want to migrate. We've got new content coming in. So that's what we're doing, is like, how do we transition this project from a project under development to a system that's in production? So we needed to make sure that we can handle production workflows and production workloads. There's a lot of testing in the fall. Particularly want to shout out to Longshoe in San Diego. Did a lot of testing of large objects and things like that, and identified and fixed some issues. And we wanted to get San Diego and Santa Barbara aligned on everything that it makes sense to align on. Make sure that we're using the same words in the same way when we talk to each other about Comet and how we use Comet. And where we do have different needs or different vocabularies, make sure that we all are clear on what those differences are and that they're all intentional. And finally, just getting more people using the system. Chrissy talked about this a little bit, but onboarding more users, getting people testing more actively, starting to look at training and rolling out the system to users. Next, please. So what we got done this cycle, a lot of testing, and thank you for everybody who worked on that. Really appreciate it. As Michael said, both campuses were kind of doing this in the fall on our own, but we continued that and stepped it up and identified and fixed a bunch of real world critical path issues. I really appreciate the work the team's done there. Also, a huge amount of work by our infrastructure team, particularly Alex at Santa Barbara and Matt at San Diego, getting our infrastructure production ready. Again, I'm sort of moving that also from like a development mode to a production mode, making sure everything's stable, making sure that when issues do come up, we can respond quickly. And as the system gets more usage and we identify new features we need or changes we want to make or start to add on functionality for use cases and types of data that aren't necessarily in our like initial rollout, we want to be able to do that smoothly and efficiently. And we did achieve a lot of that alignment we were looking for. We had a lot of great productive meetings with folks from both Santa Barbara and San Diego, talking about file types, talking about our different use cases, working out these environment questions that Chrissy was talking about, are really starting to like, now that this is getting real, how are we really going to use the system and what do we really need out of it? Next, please. So up next, in our next work cycle, we're going to set up those new sandbox and preview environments and make sure that those workflows that we identified, small W workflows, are the ones that people wanted. In terms of like being able to preview production content before it goes out to where patrons can see it, those kinds of things. We're going to integrate with Daylight as Daylight starts to come together into, we bring those components together into a discovery platform. That's where the rubber hits the road on Comet's ability to export data out to discovery systems. We're going to keep testing. We're going to, by humans, we're also going to improve and expand our automated testing and move forward to support more different kinds of objects and different kinds of data and sort of the needs of different constituencies within the library in terms of what they want to put in Comet. And also continue to bring more users on, train more users, get feedback, get more people hands-on with the system so that they can really tell us what works for them and what doesn't, and what they need it to do. That's it.
All right. Thanks to all of our product teams for those awesome updates. Just a few wrap up. So I had briefly alluded to this at the beginning about how we were experimenting with changes with how we're working together. And during one of our recent sprint retrospective, the team requested that we change the duration of our sprints from 2 weeks to 3. And the feedback that we received was really that the team wanted to have extra time during the sprint to meet with subject matter experts and stakeholders to really unpack and understand user requirements that are coming out of these discussions around getting things into production. And that because meeting schedules are difficult, like we wanted to make sure that we had time during the sprint to have those meetings, have those discussions, really unpack it, but then also be able to implement them during the sprint. And so we're hoping that this new cadence allows us to do that. And it also, we hope, allows us to be a little bit more efficient with the team's time. In terms of the required sprint meetings, we do sprint planning, we do retrospectives, we do demos, because even though our work cycles will be approximately the same duration, we'll have one less of each one of those meetings during that same time frame. So our next work cycle is scheduled to start on April 2nd and run through June 3rd, but instead of 4 2-week sprints, it will be 3 3-week sprints. And if I can find there we go. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Michael to talk about what we'll be focusing on in the themes of that next work cycle.
Thank you, Chrissy. So to everyone in the audience, this wall of text was intentional, but there's a method to the madness between the bold and color choices to describe sort of thematically what we'll be pursuing and at the same time give you some individual context. So you can laugh with me, a little bit of comedy relief there. So for work cycle 2, I think what you're going to see is, while it looks a lot like some of the goals from work cycle 1, and while there's a strong tie-in because of the natural consistency, like we're still going to be working on Daylight and Lark and Comet, And we have some examples of some new things that we'll be doing to move those things forward. What I want to draw out in some of the blue text here is just this sort of more intentional shift towards integration across these, and how that represents coming together as like a working life cycle as a service. Earlier we saw Elisa give us this demo of individual components, and in the progression of her demo at the end we saw how they come together and fit together, and this is like that same thing but across this product suite. And what we really want to start to do is specifically with Daylight, and actually Margaret mentioned this with Lark, we actually want to have real data in there, right? We want them connected with real data and be able to execute our testing across those life cycles. And so I think for Daylight, I think that we have a very clear path. I promise I will not read that entire slide to you. I think some notable improvements there or exciting focus is going to be on like some IIIF component development, right? Like what does that look like? What are those needs? And that will allow us to step into that a little bit more intentionally. I think for Lark, we're seeing again some of those themes and that Margaret called out earlier. Comet, naturally, we're going to be doing a lot more data migration testing in QA. I'm sure that there's going to be a high overlap with the DevOps related goals here that we have. And again, really, it's that prioritizing sort of iteration time and decreasing feedback loops. Things like cycle times from long-running system tests. And I really want to call out the role of like the foundational role that the environment changes that Chrissy talked about will have in underpinning all of this, right? Shared understanding between like what the intention is behind an environment and then how those environments are actually put into production, enabling this data lifecycle. So I hope that was enough of a compelling narrative as to why you have a wall of text in front of you. I think that the next work cycle recap is going to offer some really, really fun things to look at together. And I think both Chrissy and I want to extend just a shout out to the entire team for closing some serious gaps this work cycle. We're both impressed and appreciative of their dedication across all of these facets. And Chrissy, I think it would be fair to say that we are also thinking about stakeholder updates and some improvements, and to be able to better meet where the information at the level that our stakeholders would like, in terms of like how much closer does this bring us respectively to MVPs at each campus, or various things at that level, and marrying that with the level of detail that you see here.
Yeah, exactly. So I will just remind folks that there's lots of ways to keep in touch with us outside of these meetings. There is an extremely active Surfliner Slack, a less overwhelmingly active Surfliner announced Slack channel over on UC Tech. The team is always active there, so if you have a question, don't be shy about reaching out. We also have the blog where we share out recordings of this, as well as our sprint review recordings. And you can always reach out to me or Michael if you have any questions too. But speaking of questions, I will open the floor to anyone who might have some for the team. And feel free to unmute or to paste a question in chat. We will also give a chance after we stop the recording, or maybe we can stop the recording for questions. I know. Oh, excellent. I'm going to read this question out. Tim says, I heard that Surfliner was able to get a GitLab open source license, and that seems like a pretty big deal that should be celebrated. I agree. Michael Stewart, thank you so much. He spent so much time getting that in place for the team. And one of the things that's so impactful about this is there's a lot of features that the team has not had access to in GitLab that this really opens up. And so that's going to be huge for the team. So thank you so much for that, Michael. Does anyone else have any questions? Gabriella, do you mind stopping the recording? I know sometimes I'm a little not wanting to ask